In Salem village in the spring of 1692, the colonists had been living in the Massachusetts colony for about 60 years. After some of the young girls in the village became afflicted with a mysterious illness and behavior, their families were desperate for a diagnosis. Their parents called upon a local doctor who claimed they were bewitched. This diagnosis started the witch hunt and court trials known as the Salem witch trials. Throughout them, the afflicted girls accused over 100 people of witchcraft, who were each tried in court, 20 of which were executed. The tragedies of this event were that large amounts of innocent lives were lost, the people were left angry, fearful, and grieving, and that some people names associated with the trials were left with criminal records. The triumphs were that new officials were selected in the aftermath of the trials to attempt to make the village better. People who were left with criminal records were exonerated, and that by making these mistakes, our Constitution was able to create a system to prevent us from making them in the future, such as the 5th, 8th, and 9th Amendments. Since the 15th century, witch panics have been spreading throughout Europe, which led to witch hunts, accusations, trials, and executions. A witch hunt is the searching out for persecution of persons accused of witchcraft. By the Constitution of Omnipotentis, I command that a person who makes pacts with the devil or practice black magic that had caused the death of another should be surrendered. By the Pope declaring this, the people were constantly worried about the devil targeting their religion. In Europe, most commonly, witches were put to death by being hanged after being suspected of black magic. People in the 15th century Europe believed witches could worship the devil through animals and other forms, so people were always on the lookout for behavior like this. As history progressed, the discovery of North America led to thousands of people leaving England to start new lives in the colonies, bringing along all the fears and knowledge of Pope Gregory's black magic proposition. One of the main colonies was known as Salem Village, founded in 1626. Another main settlement was Connecticut, where witchcraft was also decreed a crime. So when a young girl named Anne Cole became unexplainably afflicted, she blamed a neighbor, Rebecca Greensmith, for bewitchment. She was hanged and Anne returned to health. This marked one of the first American witch hunts. About 45 years later, King William's War colonists left refugees fleeing to seek shelter in Salem Village. This caused strain on the village resources and aggravated families. The Puritan villagers believed all the quarreling was a work of the devil. Another trigger for dispute in Salem Village was the arrival of a new reverend, Samuel Parris, who many disliked. Because of the time period, the colonists did not know how to properly diagnose sicknesses that people could have developed. The people were always so fearful that the devil was constantly trying to infiltrate and destroy Christians and their community if anything went wrong.
The default explanation for something that they can't figure out an answer to. So, for example, this is a period before the scientific revolution. This is a period before anybody understands germs. This is a period before anyone understands animal diseases. So if a cow suddenly falls ill after is really in great shape one day and it dies the next day, and no one has an explanation for it, it would be an attempt by the person who owned the cow to say, what could have caused this? And oh my goodness, last week I had this fight with my neighbor when this cow got into her cornfield and she said, you better watch out. And I think she bewitched my cow and my cow is now dead. And this would be done with the deaths of children or mysterious accidents.
In the winter of 1692, the first case involving two village girls known as Betty Parris and Abigail Williams broke out. After the girls became afflicted, a doctor, William Griggs, diagnosed the girls with bewitchment. When Salem got word of Abigail Williams and Betty Parris's diagnosis, panic struck out. Abigail and Betty were encouraged by Dr. William Griggs to accuse their bewitchers. The first person to be accused was a West Indian slave named Tituba, owned by the Parrises. The girls continued to accuse their bewitchers and pointed out two other village outcasts known as Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. The first three accused were examined. Tituba admitted to bewitching the girls, which was proven a false claim, and she ended up being put in jail. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne maintained their claim of non-guiltiness and ended up being hanged.
The problem with charges of witchcraft is that they can't be disproved. People can confess, but in order to confess, you have to name, to prove you're really confessing, you have to name other people as witches. Most of the people accused of being witches were women, middle-aged women, who had exhibited some form of independence in the society, which was not really desired by men in Puritan society. And charges of witchcraft, to some extent, became a way of keeping women under control by the society. But the whole episode totally snowballed out of control. People began naming others.
After the first girls became afflicted, others started to as well and went on accusing other people. But in order to properly put accused witches on trial, Sir William Phips created the Oyer and Terminer Court especially for witchcraft. John Hawthorne, an Oyer and Terminer judge chosen by Sir William Phips, rather than being an impartial judge, he served as a prosecutor, and he encouraged the accused to confess and name other witches. The first accused witch to be tried in the new court was Bridget Bishop, who was charged with bewitching Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott, and Elizabeth Hubbard. In her examination, Bridget states, "I have made no contact with the devil. I never saw him in my life. Ann Putnam saith she calls the devil her God. By keeping her claim of innocence, she was hanged." The guilty accused witches were jailed and executed by hanging at Gallows Hill, Bridget Bishop being the first, and 18 more to follow. The trials began to die down in September of 1692, the last conviction being in early 1693. The tragic Salem witch trials of 1692 left 154 people accused, 19 people executed, and many people to die in jail. After the trials ended, an Oyer and Terminer judge, Samuel Sewall, publicly confessed to error and guilt, and later the court declared the trials unlawful. Reverend Samuel Parris did not apologize for his unlawful behavior during the trials until 1694. He was kicked out of the village in 1696 and replaced, and a new court of judicature was created. Ann Putnam Jr. also apologized for her role as an accuser during the trials in 1706. "I desire to be humbled before God for that sad and humbling providence that befell my father's family in the year about 92, that I, then being in my childhood, should by such a providence of God be made an instrument for the accusing of several people for grievous crimes, whereby their lives was taken away from them, whom now I have just grounds and good reasons to believe they were innocent persons, and that it was a great delusion of Satan that deceived me in that sad time." Ann Putnam. By 1711, 22 of the 33 people convicted were exonerated by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which also paid some of the victims' families. Sadly, it was not until 2001 that the rest of the convicted were fully exonerated. A negative effect from the trials is the continuation of witch hunts to this day. Creating an example of what not to do ended up being an influence later. Today, the Salem witch trials hysteria influences our justice system, making it organized and fair. We learned from our mistakes and created rights such as the 5th, 8th, and 9th Amendments to protect against the repetition of this event. The Salem, Massachusetts witch trials of 1692 was a tragic event that resulted in many innocent lives lost. People were left angry and grieving, and also stuck with criminal records. The rights that the victims were deprived of should have been entitled to them. What we take away today is knowing that this event will not be repeated because of the Bill of Rights, making the law fair and just.